Hello, America. Welcome. It's Erick Erickson here across the nation. Delighted to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425 should you wish to be on the program. Delighted to have you today. I want to begin just out of the gate. We'll get to all the other administrative stuff later because this is really, it's been on my mind since yesterday's show. And there's a lot we have to cover regarding the arrest of Luigi Mangione. And not just, as an aside, I do think the meme is very funny. How Italian is this guy? So Italian, he had to flirt with a girl on his way to commit a murder. And that's what got him caught when he pulled down his mask because the girl at the hostel thought he was hot and he needed to show his face to her to prove it. And that was the picture. Here's what we know, just to review. A senior citizen eating at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, recognized him, called the police in Altoona, Pennsylvania. They showed up. They detained him. They found on his possession a gun, a 3D manufactured suppressor, ammunition, money, foreign currency, a passport, and a Faraday bag. If you don't know what a Faraday bag is a bag in which you can put electronics and it blocks their reception so they don't connect to cell towers and the like, and they can't be monitored. It's also tends to be waterproof, and he claims it was a waterproof bag, and that's why he had it. He spoke in court, and he made some odd statements on what he was contesting and not contesting. He had what people are calling a manifesto, and I got to be real clear with you. It's not actually a manifesto. It was like 2 pages. A manifesto is like what the Unabomber did, which is essentially a book of, although crazy, an ordered thought process. The guy definitely is an anti-capitalist progressive, but his mind is not an ordered mind, and he has lots of conflicting thoughts. Everybody has conflicting thoughts, but his ideas really did conflict. He was very much into climate change, very anti-capitalist, hated insurance companies, but also hated the wokes. He had read books by libertarian and conservatives that he liked, but also was like a Bernie bro when it came to capitalism. What we know is about 6 months ago, he fell off the grid after back surgery, and his mind began to unravel as much as people can figure out. So, yeah, he certainly leaned left and had left-wing sympathies, particularly when it came to hatred of insurance companies, but he also had some thoughts that some would say were right-wing. He is a mentally disordered young man who also apparently was into psychedelic mushrooms and other things. I think long-term history is going to show it's not a coincidence. But I want to focus on something else, and this is really where my mind has been the last couple of days and really the last week. And I've spent way more time than I think I probably should on this issue. But there is something today we need to discuss, and that is his views about killing the insurance company executive, and people on the left cheering it on. Overnight, someone exposed an anonymous Reddit thread from the University of Pennsylvania where Penn students are excited and happy and proud of their university that one of their own might have murdered an insurance executive. I got into this a little bit yesterday. Tim Keller and his Reason for God talking about the great says who. If morals don't come from God, then what matters? Who says? Who cares? Everything is relative. But there's a larger issue here. What we're finding, and by the way, this applies to the left and the right, more so on the left in this situation, but it's happening to the right as well in certain situations. When you decide that someone is bad, or in the word everybody likes to use now, evil, and you decide you can exterminate them because they're evil, this ends badly for all of us. Today, people on the left are cheering on an insurance executive being gunned down. Will they be cheering on when a trans advocate, pediatrician, is murdered by someone on the right? Will they? Will the right some of whom might cheer on killing a pediatrician who performs sex reassignment surgeries. Will the right then be okay with the oil executive being murdered? And when the left cheers on the oil executive being murdered because you know it's probably coming, will they cheer on the abortion clinic doctor who's murdered? We've had abortion clinic doctors murdered in this country, and the pro-life community resoundingly condemned the murders. And the left tried to anchor all of those people into saying, well, they were on the right and this is what the right wants. Whenever someone on the left is killed, the media and the left together disproportionately condemn the right, and they never do the same on the left. When James Hodgkinson attempted mass assassination of Republican members of Congress in 2017, the story was gone within 3 days. When it turned out he was a Bernie Sanders supporter who watched MSNBC, it was off the New York Times. The Gabrielle Gifford's attempted assassination by Jared Loughner in Arizona stayed on the front page of the paper longer as they condemned Sarah Palin and Republicans for promoting violence until it turned out Jared Loughner was just an insane guy, and to the extent he had political views, they were on the left. And then the story disappeared. When it was very clear that James Hodgkinson was a left-wing activist, they memory hold that attempted assassination on Republican members of Congress as quickly as they can. I want to talk to you Democrats here. Y'all are in the driver's seat on this. You cannot what about on abortion clinics or even Daniel Penny on this situation. In this situation, you have a person on the left who decided to kill an insurance executive, and people on the left have cheered. When the oil executives are murdered, you will cheer as well. And I'm telling you, people on the right will begin to do the same thing to your side. That Joe Biden and Democrats cannot come out and condemn the taking of innocent life without adding a but we understand, but this, but that. It's like the attacks on Jews in this country. People are not firebombing mosques in this country and vandalizing Muslim homes, but Joe Biden and the Democrats are incapable of coming out and saying attacks on Jews are bad without also going, but Islamophobia is bad too. There's no but here. The taking of a human life by an individual in vigilante justice must be condemned without a but, without an understanding, without a caveat. And yet they're incapable of doing it. And that's going to go very badly for everybody. To my friends on the Democratic side, it is you in the driver's seat on this issue because it was an insurance executive who was killed, and it is the people on the left who are cheering this on. If your leadership on the left within the Democratic Party cannot stand up and say, you cannot kill someone just because you don't like his job or the company he works for. Companies are not inherently evil. They're just a group of people who you disagree with, except on both sides now, we're getting this idea that anyone I disagree with is evil. And you throw out the examples. Oh, well, the doctor who performs gender transition surgeries on minors, I don't just disagree with him. He's evil. I don't disagree, but should that guy be killed? I hope you say no. But this is the issue as well with the left. If you're going to say these things are acceptable, you can't, on the left, say it's acceptable when we decide to kill. You can't decide which groups you think are worth killing. Either it's all or nothing. And we should all be terribly bothered that people on the left, including in politics, don't want to come out without adding a but. It would diffuse the coming terror if Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden came out and said there can be no but when it comes to taking a human life. There can be no understanding. There can only be condemnation. And if you can't understand that, you need to step back and touch some grass. Because I've heard it from people trying to understand. I get the frustrations, all that, but when you go from I'm going to take this guy's life to taking a life is wrong, but I understand, then you have to apply it to the CEOs of the oil companies. And you have to apply it to the doctors who perform abortions and gender transitions. And you have to apply it to the teachers who put up rainbow flags in their room where people accuse them of indoctrinating. And you have to apply it to conservative talk radio show hosts like me. And you have to apply it to Trump supporters. And you have to apply it to Kamala Harris supporters. And you have to apply it to everyone, because you do not get to define the exception to the rule. You don't get to do that. None of us get to do that. And if your group, your tribe decides we get to define what comes after the but, then everybody gets to define it, because you can't stop it. You can't put your finger in the dam and stop the water from coming out at that point. It's either no one should be murdered for the job they do and the affiliations they have, or there's a but. And if there's a but, then all of us get to add our preferences afterwards, and you can't control it. So Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you should come out for your own lives' sake, frankly, and those of your political supporters and those of the businesses and industries you support, you should be able to come out and say, there can be no but here. Taking a life is wrong. Period. End of story. But you can't. You can't do that, and that's the problem, and that's why it's going to get worse. You're not mentally, physically, or philosophically capable of doing that, because some of you deep down privately think, he probably had it coming. And if you think that, there are going to be people on the other side who think that. We just had 2 attempts on Donald Trump's life, and many people, even in the media, were kind of like, he kind of got it coming. When you start adding those justifications, even if it was bad, he shouldn't have, but he kind of had it coming. The but explodes this thing for all of us. Brian Thompson should not have been murdered because he was fearfully made in the image of the living God. Period. End of story. There's no but there. Brian Thompson happened to be a self-made man and an insurance executive, and because of the company he works for, he doesn't deserve to be killed. The President of the United States, despite your angry objections to his policies, does not deserve assassination. The doctor who performs abortions does not deserve assassination. Let God deal with them. The problem is, on the left, they don't have God anymore. They only have themselves. And they are choosing to take it upon themselves to be God. If Democratic politicians, and I'm laying the marker down now, if Democratic politicians are not willing, and I'm not talking about a John Fetterman who's done it, but a president of the United States and the leading progressive voices in the country, including Barack Obama, if they are not willing to come out and say, there's no but here, no one in this country deserves death, and it is not justifiable in any way, shape, or form in any circumstance just because you don't like the person or you don't like the business or the industry they worked in. There's no but here. You cannot go around killing people who you don't like, or whose businesses you don't like, or whose industries you don't like, or whose politics you don't like. There's no but. You cannot do this. If none of them are willing to do it, you're going to have more people on the left say, first insurance. Well, it's the oil company CEOs who are killing the planet. We better take them out. And then you're going to have people on the right reciprocate. You either stop it now and excise the but from the sentence and denounce murder, or you're going to see more of them. This is the world in which we live. Everyone has decided they are judge, jury, and executioner because there is no God. And this is starting from the left, but it will not stay there. And for those of you who want to justify it with Daniel Penny, and you can't rationalize people were physically fearful of this guy on the subway, no one was physically fearful of Brian Thompson walking down the street. If you can't nuance it, your brain is broken, you're contributing to the problem. There will be more violence. We either stop it now or it's going to spread. Hello there. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here across the nation. I want to play for you a clip of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was interviewed about Daniel Penny in New York.
Essentially said that he would do it again if necessary, if there was a present threat. What do you make of the comments? doesn't that, I just feel like that tells us everything. If we do not want violence on our subways, and the point of our justice system is a level of accountability to prevent a person who does not have remorse about taking another person's life. I mean, even people who have engaged in manslaughter or have taken a life accidentally express remorse. And so the fact that a person may express no remorse indicates that there's a risk that it may happen again.
That's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. What people on the left refuse to distinguish between Mangione's alleged shooting of Brian Thompson and what Daniel Penny did is people on that subway physically felt threatened by the insane schizophrenic homeless man. One woman in court testified. She was with her child in a stroller, and she removed her child from the stroller and put the child behind the stroller, using the stroller as a shield from her child because she believed that the schizophrenic homeless man was going to hurt her child. Brian Thompson was walking down the street and shot in the back, not physically hurting anyone. And before anybody wants to go into the abstract stuff, but he was in charge of an insurance company. No, I'm sorry, that's not the same thing. And if you can't understand that, you are mentally broken, should surrender your right to vote and check yourself into a mental institution. AOC may need to join you if she can't distinguish these things. Now, one of the great groups out there standing for law and order and common sense is Americans for Prosperity, and they would love to have you on their team. Did a great event for them in Salt Lake City this weekend, had a huge crowd show up, and just advocating for common sense conservative reform in this country. All you have to do is go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer and sign up with AFP. You become a member of one of their chapters. They have chapters in just about every single state in the country now. And they would love to have you on board. And by the way, in those states where there isn't a chapter, they have an organizer who still meets and is trying to get those chapters organized. You may be in on the ground floor. Go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. Sign up with AFP. They'll teach you how to be an effective advocate for common sense conservative solutions. They'll teach you how to be an effective advocate for families and free markets around the country. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Sign up with AFP today. Join me in the fight for freedom in this country with Americans for Prosperity. Again, chapters in just about every single state now. Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425 if you want to be on the program. I assume many of you have over the years seen those questions from like the late 1800s or the turn of the 20th century, questions you would ask a fifth grader, and they're very detailed questions that a lot of college kids these days would scratch their head and say, I have no idea. Or even things from the 1950s or 60s. It shows to a degree how dumb we as a society have gotten. Not everyone. But, I mean, we know school scores, literacy rates, the ability to do math have gone down, and thanks to the indoctrination in our public schools and even some colleges, critical thinking skills have collapsed. The ability to distinguish, for example, between bad and labeling everything evil, and this is a pet peeve I have from my own side, honestly, is that a lot of people want to label the other side evil so quickly. Many of you listening right now want to label the other side evil, and I get it on abortion, transgenderism, all that stuff. But, you're a sinner too. And you have a hard time ever attributing evil to yourself. And it's the thing I try to get people to understand is that no evil person wakes up in the morning, looks in the mirror and says, how are we going to be evil today? No, every evil person, even Hitler, thought he was doing good. And when you approach everyone by saying you're doing evil, well, they are immediately going to tune you out. You're never going to get someone to understand what they're doing is bad or wrong or evil when you're immediately, oh, you're evil. It's like the person who stands outside the gay person's home with a bullhorn and tells them to repent or burn, they're going to think you're a biblical donkey. They're not going to change their lifestyle. And we on our side oftentimes are so quick to label the other side evil. And look, I acknowledge the evil, but at the same time, approaching it from that way, which has a religiosity to it in a secular world, it's unhelpful. But there is evil. Both sides, however, though, when they decide to determine that the other side is evil, all they do is ramp up their own side's agitation. And it continues to be a ratchet, and it's getting tighter and tighter in this country, and it's not going to unwind itself or unrestrict itself. And part of the problem on the left is the Ivy League. Luigi Mangione went to Penn, where they have been overwhelmed with anti-Semitism. In the Middle East, there are madrasas. Madrasas are religious schools, and what we have found since 9/11, 2001, is a lot of young men in the Middle East go to madrasas, and they get radicalized by fundamentalist Islamic clerics in the madrasas, and they decide the only way to guarantee themselves going into heaven is to be a bomber and commit suicide and take out the infidel. The Ivy League in this country and many private institutions of higher learning in this country are becoming madrasas for progressives, and they're radicalizing them. And they're turning to violence. We don't talk enough about this. You see, here's the thing. It is the Christmas season, and I'm going to do a mild bit of theology here. Just buckle up, brace yourselves. Religion doesn't go away. Every person is religious. Even an atheist is religious. An atheist has things that they have a burning passion for, whether they call it social justice or racial reconciliation. Atheists are as religious as people who go to church. You're either worshiping the real God or you're worshiping a God you created. Religion is with all of us. You can say that it is part of the evolutionary experience, that we all seek a higher calling, or you can say it's part of the divine, and the resistance to the divine is those who reject God, mock God. And so we all have this religiosity built into us because we're made in his image. And those who have rejected him can only mock and mimic. They can't actually worship the real God. Or you can say it's part of the evolutionary experience that we have this feeling, this belief that we strive to something higher. And it's part of the evolutionary chemistry of our brain to try to strive for something higher. And it manifests in some ways as a belief in God. And for others, it manifests in a way for justice, social justice on planet Earth. But we don't get rid of religion. And some people go to church or synagogue or temple or mosque, and they connect with their God and their religion. And others who reject God but still have religiosity, they go to college campuses in the Ivy League, and it is a religious experience for them. And like the radical Islamists going to the madrasas, these people are going to Ivy League campuses, and they're getting radicalized. Luigi Mangione is only one of many. And it's not just the Ivy League, but a lot of it is the Ivy League. Think about the anti-Semitic protests at Columbia, at Penn, at Harvard, even at MIT, at Yale. Think of the Students for Justice in Palestine leaders at George Mason University, who the FBI has raided. They found guns and ammunition, and it appears to be possibly a plot to kill Jews. People are going to colleges. They're not getting education. They're getting radicalization. They're getting indoctrinated. So one reason I'm a big advocate of Southern schools and the SEC, there's less of it there. Not everywhere. I mean, you still got the Emroids to deal with at Emory. You still got the people at Duke. Duke can be a hotbed of radicalization. But the universities of Georgia, Auburn, University of Alabama, Tennessee, Vandy, you're less likely to get it in the SEC. My daughter deals with it at her college to a degree, has one very progressive professor. But it's unrelated. There is. She tells stories of some of the students in her group, some of her friends, and taking a class from a feminist professor who studies Islam and regularly denounces Christianity in class. The school is not woke, but it certainly has some woke professors, and the woke professors abusing their positions, radicalizing people. The Ivy League, however, is where so much radicalization is happening in the minds of Americans. And also, what is happening as a precursor to getting there is the breakdown in logical thinking. So my kid she's going through a great books program in college, and she's in the very first one. They had to read Plato. And she said she thought it was notable that many of the kids who came from a classical education environment liked dealing in Plato, and the kids who did not go to a classical education school really hated it. Now, what is Plato? Well, Socrates himself didn't write. He was illiterate, but Plato covered Socrates and the Socratic method, and you ask questions and you probe and you debate to get the answers and the truth. And on the left, they don't like that. It is by fiat. This is so, and no one's allowed to challenge it. On the other hand, we're seeing a trend, particularly on social media, where there are a lot of people who are just asking questions. You hear that a lot. People, they're just asking questions. And the conspiracy theorists, when Socrates asked questions in the Socratic method, it was to ascertain truth. When these guys on social media start doing it, it has nothing to do with ascertaining truth and everything to do with muddying the water to seed distrust. Carrie Sloan put up pictures of Luigi Mangione, one with his six-pack shirtless picture from Hawaii, the other the picture from his holding cell where he's very thin. Never mind, he's had back surgery in the past 6 months, and his friends say it messed up his mind and he lost a lot of weight, but she says she put up those pictures. I have questions, lots of questions. The photos here are not the same guys, and it's awfully strange to see a photo of a suspect from a so-called holding cell. And there's Kyle Becker, who seeds all this sort of nonsense online. I think he likes to just ask questions, and he highlights the oddity of Luigi Mangione. Doesn't question the gun, doesn't question the 3D printed suppressor in his bag, but he questions the cash and says the cash, it wasn't his cash. Maybe it was planted on him. And he questions the Faraday bag, says it was just a waterproof bag. And then it says, do you believe him? Followed by, apropos of nothing. And he puts up various stories about the Trump shooter who they claimed was basically homeless, appeared to have 18 cell phones with 5 different companies, 3 computers, 3 laptops, 5 storage drives, 4,000 terabytes digital footage, suggesting there's something sinister there. Maybe there's some sort of plot. I don't know. He's just asking questions. There's another person who wants to know if Mangione ever worked for the CIA. Something's not making sense. If he was a whiz kid, why did he make so many sloppy mistakes? Kira Turnbow, questions are warranted. Kim Saint Onge, I have no idea, ONGE. Now the question is, who paid this guy to kill Brian Thompson? I don't believe this Luigi guy plotted this murder on his own. They're just asking questions, folks. They're just asking questions. Put up on Twitter. I suspect we're about to witness something on Twitter. The people who were suspicious it took so long for the cops to find a suspect will now suggest perhaps the suspect they found is a setup. And some lady named Mary Underwood replied back, it clearly is. Think about it. What am I going to think about? So we went from you can't trust the feds to we can't trust the local police in Altoona, Pennsylvania now. It was maybe none of them, they want to ask a lot of questions about how did they find this guy. None of them want to ask this question. Why would the Altoona, Pennsylvania police put foreign currency in this guy's backpack and a Faraday bag just to muddy the water? What interest do they have in helping sow doubt about a murder 300 miles away? None. They have none. All these people who take legitimate advantage of the feds ruining their credibility now want to see doubt about everything, and they just want to ask questions. They never want the answers. They just want to ask the questions. You'll find that when you keep doing this, you've explained explanation itself away. You can't go on seeing through everything forever. The whole point of seeing through something is to see something through it. It's good that the window should be transparent because the street or garden beyond it is opaque. How if you saw through the garden too? It is no use trying to see through first principle. If you see through everything, then everything is transparent. But a wholly transparent world is an invisible world. To see through all things is the same as not to see. These people don't want to see. I want to know how many of them have monetized their Twitter accounts. Our society is dangerously close to spiraling out of control. We have a lot of conspiracy theorists with monetized Twitter accounts who are just trying to sow distrust that they can capitalize and profit on. We have Ivy League institutions who are radicalizing students against Jews, against capitalism, against their fellow American. And we don't have any leadership in the country standing up on a bipartisan basis saying this is wrong. Very few, at least. One of the ones who has, to his credit, is Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. You'll recall when he came out after the attempted Trump assassination, condemned it with no buts. He's now done the same thing with the killing of Brian Thompson, said that there can be no justification. Taking a human life in vigilante justice is wrong. There's no justification for it. And he's right. Ivy Leagues are radicalizing American kids against Americans. And I suspect the Trump team should consider taxing their endowments as a way to shut them down, if not force reform. But on both sides, the people who are just asking questions have turned malicious, and we should be concerned about where they're headed and what they're doing. Some questions have answers. People just don't want to hear the answers. They only want to ask questions because there's no profit in the answer. That's a problem. Let me tell you about my friends at Vision Computer before I get out of here. If you're looking at buying a computer for Christmas, they can take your old computer and transfer all the data, transfer all the files, transfer all the apps, transfer all the settings, transfer all the preferences. They can even transfer your email. They can help you with printer support. And then you get their world-class 5-star customer service for free. Where if you ever have a question, you get a special phone number to call, and they can answer you in 15 seconds or less. You don't get put on hold. You don't go through the call, phone tree, no hot less manual, press whatever. You just get someone on the phone, you tell them what's going on, and they help you. They can even remote in if need be. All you have to do is call them at 404-COMPUTE and tell them I sent you. 404-COMPUTE, any one of you nationwide. Even if you're up in Kalispell, Montana, if you're in Sacramento, California, if you're in Miami, Florida, if you're up in Hartford, Connecticut, they can help you. They can build your computers. They can save you money. And if you're a small business and you need to upgrade before the end of the year for tax purposes, let them help you anywhere nationwide. And then each computer comes for free with the tech support. And if you just want the tech support, you don't need a new computer. Call them at 404-COMPUTE. And for $179 a year, they can be your tech support solution. If you're a freelancer, if you're in the gig economy, if you're a small business, let them help you. 404-COMPUTE. Tell them I sent you. You save some money. 404-COMPUTE or visioncomputers.com. Hello, welcome. It's Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425 if you want to be on the program. As always, if you will text the word Erick, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you get the show notes, the podcast, the live stream, social media, all that sort of stuff. I am putting together the Christmas program. You'll be able to get it for podcasts. We'll, of course, air I think Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, lining up some good conversations. Going to play a couple of old conversations that I thought were great as well. So stick around for that. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan there in Noonan, Georgia. Don't let that discourage you if you're in Kalispell, if you're in Springfield, Illinois, wherever you are. If you're in Grand Forks, North Dakota, listening to us. Yes, I'm on in North Dakota. They can help your business grow. They love to help businesses nationwide. Reach out to them. FirstLibertyGA.com. You need access to capital. They've been making their decisions since the 90s by themselves. They make their own decisions. The better credit you have, the faster they can move. FirstLibertyGA.com. FirstLibertyGA.com. Y'all, I gotta just comment real quick that the President of the United States, I think, has very smartly, and I'm talking Donald Trump, has laid a trap for Christopher Wray. Christopher Wray is the FBI director, and he says he has no intention of resigning his position. But here's the thing. Under precedent, if Donald Trump comes into office and waits for Congress to go on recess and fires Christopher Wray, then Donald Trump can appoint Kash Patel to the position. If Donald Trump fires Christopher Wray and Congress is not in session, Trump can appoint Kash Patel. But if Christopher Wray resigns his position, one, he keeps his pension. He doesn't if he's fired. But two, if he resigns before Donald Trump can fire him, and while Congress is in session, the president cannot appoint without Senate confirmation. He's forcing Christopher Wray's hands. Now, Charles Grassley, the senator from Iowa, came out yesterday very forcefully and said to Christopher Wray, you need to resign. I don't have your back. I'm not going to support keeping you. You have run an office that seems like it's not even accountable to Congress. You're done. Wray is going to need to leave his office if he wants to stop Kash Patel from getting directly appointed. So there you have it. We'll see how this works. When we come back, in the final month in office, Joe Biden is doing everything he can to gum up the works for Donald Trump on energy, natural gas production, and other things. I want to tell you the state of play, including the National Labor Relations Board. It's a very big story you got to keep your eye on as the bureaucrats are rapidly trying to pass some regulations to stop the Trump administration from energy expansion in this country. Hello, America. Welcome. It's Erick Erickson here across the nation. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I would be delighted to have you with me if you text the word Army to 33777. Just follow along with me here. We are starting. The show is growing. I can't tell you the stations yet, but in about 20 days from now, we will be on 13 more stations, and then we'll be picking up some more in the new year. The show is starting to grow and pretty rapidly. And in some areas, the local stations want to know, like, for example, I can see our live stream data. We've got a lot of people who listen to the show on live stream, and being able to ask those people, text Army to 33777, fill out the information, your name, your email, your zip code, and we can send you an email after the first of the year as these stations are talking to us and say, hey, will y'all reach out and just prove that, yes, actually, we do listen. It would be wonderful if you would consider doing that. Text Army to 33777, help us grow. And also, you'll then get into the activist portal. You'll be able to see your members of Congress, their phone numbers, your local city government phone numbers, all that. It will be fantastic. Very, very happy to have you participate. Would very much like it. Now, we must move on. I will resist. My boss is texting me at the moment. I will wait for commercial break to text him back. Because otherwise, I can talk and type at the same time, but my producer knows when I do that and he gets very upset with me. We got to talk about Joe Biden anyway. As much as I can multitask, Joe Biden is incapable of multitasking, but his bureaucrats are capable. And it's part of the problem we're dealing with in this country right now is the Biden team has decided that they want to complicate Donald Trump's energy push. Now, let me step back from a 50,000 foot view down. We're never going to get rid of fossil fuels, at least within the next 100 years. Here's why. Your plastics, a lot of it derived from fossil fuels. The rubber on your car tires for your battery-powered car, fossil fuels. Much of your synthetic clothing fibers, fossil fuels. And then we got the problems of, the military. Your tanks are never going to be battery-powered. Think about Ukraine. Ukraine has the wintertime and then the snow melt in the spring. And instead of killing fields, it's mud fields. And even the gas-powered tanks get stuck in the mud. And the battery-powered tanks would be extraordinarily heavy. You wouldn't be able to cross a bridge with a battery-powered tank. The bridge would collapse. You get into the muddy fields of Ukraine, they're going to be stuck. We're not going to have battery-powered jets. Think about this. They're trying to build a battery-powered jet, and they tested one through my neck of the woods a while back, and it could make what is a 3-hour car ride from Macon, Georgia to Augusta, Georgia. It could make that trek. Then it had to stop and charge. Think about a Boeing 777 or a Boeing 787. Boeing 787 actually does have some lithium-ion batteries on board. Remember, originally it caused problems. There were fires. They fixed the problems. It's a composite jet. It's much lighter. There are allegedly issues with the composite materials, but nonetheless, just assume for the sake of all things that they're great jets. They can fly halfway around the world nonstop. They still require fossil fuels. The combines and harvesters of the farmers of America are going to still use fossil fuel. The tractors still use fossil fuels. The weight of the battery, look, there are already problems in places in this country, including in Atlanta, Georgia. They had a parking garage collapse under the weight of a bunch of battery-powered cars. You can't put a bunch of battery-powered cars inside second floors of parking garages because the weight of the cars combined is so much more than the weight of other vehicles. The infrastructure costs to rebuild is overwhelming. We're not going to get rid of it, and yet the left has convinced themselves that they can get rid of fossil fuels. And part of the issue here is as they restrict fossil fuels in this country, they drive up the cost of fossil fuels in this country. They drive up the cost of gas. One of the best ways we could get rid of inflation is to increase our oil and gas production. Now, it is true. God's honest truth. There is greater production of natural gas and oil in this country right now than there was when Donald Trump left the presidency. And that was an all-time high, and we've passed that. Part of the issue, however, is COVID, because COVID wound things down. Remember where like the price of a barrel of oil was negative? Like the oil companies were paying you to take the oil off their hands for a time during COVID? That crippled the oil industry for a time. They took some reserves off. They took some refineries off. But now everything's back. However, here's the problem. We're not building new oil refineries. So we're capping out our supply. And yet, thanks to AI, thanks to fracking, we're rapidly able to produce more oil in this country. And in fact, there was a story out last week that some oil companies are experiencing with AI, and it is extrapolating more oil reserves. And in fact, using the AI and fracking, they have determined that this country probably has more oil reserves than the Middle East, particularly Saudi Arabia and Iran combined. We have massive amounts of oil deposits in this country that are untapped, and those that have been tapped could be tapped more efficiently with the help of AI and fracking. The Biden administration is launching a series of regulations to make it virtually impossible to drill in Anwar. During Trump's administration, they passed a law that would require drilling in Anwar. The Biden administration, in compliance with that law, is passing regulations to make it possible, but the regulations are so burdensome, companies aren't going to be able to comply with it. There is a January 9th sale. Biden opposes the drilling. So the Biden administration, according to Axios, is putting in place regulations that will drive up the cost of oil extraction with environmental concerns and care for the polar bears and the like. But it's not just that. There's also natural gas pipelines. The Biden administration is adding extra regulations to liquid natural gas pipelines, and the Department of Energy has been studying LNG in such a way that most people believe the study is going to come out and claim that it's a net negative in this country to do more natural gas. Some of the executive orders of the Biden administration will go away very quickly. But the regulations will take time to repeal. See, there's a misunderstanding, and Trump in his first term ran afoul of the Supreme Court several times doing this. The misunderstanding was this idea that because administration Obama adopted certain regulations, the Trump administration come in, just snap their finger and say, nope, those regulations are gone now. Except what Chief Justice Roberts said in each of those times was, yes, you can get rid of a past administration's regulations, but you must follow the same procedure they followed. You can't just snap your finger and say it's gone. You must follow proper procedure put in place by Congress. And that's going to slow everything down. And Biden understands something many people seem hysterically unable to understand. This is it for Trump. There's only one term. There's only one term. He's not going to have 8 years to undo the damage. He's only going to have 4. He's going to have to move very, very fast. On top of that is the issue with the National Labor Relations Board. The National Labor Relations Board has a vacancy. The Senate Democrats are moving to try to fill that vacancy. And if so, despite the Trump administration taking power January 20th of 2025, there will be a Democratic majority on the National Labor Relations Board until 2026. The Americans for Prosperity, one of my advertisers, is actually mobilizing conservative organizations to fight this. The person's name is Lauren McFerrin. She is very far left. Joe Biden moved last month to nominate her. She's been winding her way through the Senate. We don't know what Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema are going to do, but we also don't know about the Republicans. If every Republican shows up and Sinema and Manchin move to stop her nomination is dead. Manchin has been at war with Biden over the National Labor Relations Board. Sinema is just, she's given up. They haven't seen her in Congress. If she doesn't show up, it's fine. As long as all the Republicans show up. They got to stop Lauren McFerrin from being on the National Labor Relations Board. She's even so far left that J.D. Vance, who's very union sympathetic, is like, she's too liberal, too progressive. The Biden administration is trying to lay traps for Donald Trump right now. That's what they're doing in this last month in office. They're trying to complicate his ability to live up to his platform on energy efficiency and energy expansion. They're trying to complicate his labor reforms for the free market. They're trying to even complicate his foreign policy. We'll get into that at the bottom of the hour. What Donald Trump is going to need is something that he lacked in his first term. Very good lawyers. He had some good lawyers his first term, but he also had a lot of bad lawyers, and he didn't have enough. He's got to have a lot of lawyers. He's got to be lawyered up. Now, thus far, it's very encouraging. The lawyers, the caliber of the lawyers that he's hiring, it looks good to me. But with the energy regulations in particular, here's the thing. When we produce way more energy in this country, the price of gas goes down. When our energy costs go down, the production of groceries goes down. The production of beef costs go down. The production of farmer costs go down because so much of their costs have to do with the price of a gallon of diesel or gas, because that's got to be factored in for the tractors, for the combines, for the harvesters, for the planters, for everything. You lower energy prices in this country, you fight inflation. You lower energy costs in this country, you meaningfully improve lives. And if Donald Trump wants to add tariffs, like he says he wants to do, he needs to lower energy prices as much as possible. But part of that as well is going to require Congress to incentivize producing new oil refineries and new gas pipelines. You know, there's I got a, what is it? McKesson, whatever it is, the natural gas pipeline company. I own stock in the company. Now I can't think of the name. Got a letter from them the other day. They want to add they have a natural gas pipeline in my backyard, literally runs through my backyard. Got an easement. And they've decided, instead of constructing a new line, they want to expand an existing pipeline to add a second pipeline on top of the existing pipeline, because they already own the land. They're studying it. They're looking at the cost, all that sort of stuff within the same easement. They've been waiting to see how the election went. Donald Trump won, and now it looks like they're going to go full steam ahead and construct this pipeline, which they need to do. And I'm not opposed to it. I mean, I don't see it. It's buried underground, but also it would be very good for the economy. We need more capacity in the country. What the Biden administration has been doing with the regulatory approach is to reduce as much capacity as possible, which drives up prices, causes inflation, and hurts our ability to compete on the world stage. The fact that they can't get over their ideological religiosity towards climate change has been a problem, and now Trump's there. We got time to fix this, and I hope we do. Hello, it's Erick Erickson here. Welcome back. The phone number 877-973-7425. I had several people, including my buddy Andy, texted me and he said, "Hey, I got a question for you. Isn't there a rule that if a regulation is passed in the final 3 months of one administration, the second administration can repeal it without the filibuster preventing it?" Yes. There is a law that if an administration, and I actually think it's the last 6 months, maybe now, not the last 3 months, it was a law passed in the Clinton administration that if regulations are passed in the final months of an outgoing administration, the new administration in Congress can not only, one, repeal those rules with just a simple majority vote in the Senate, no filibuster allowed, but also those rules can never be adopted again. And so the multiple people are asking, well, why can't Congress do that? I'm glad you are, and I'm glad you caught that, but there's a catch here. So the new leases and sales for land rights with the Anwar land is going to be released January 9th. And so the leases are going to have the regulatory language in it. And because the leases will have the regulatory language, that's an exception to the rule. Because an outside entity will be agreeing to the regulatory language through a lease, those regulations cannot be undone by the new Congress automatically. They have to be redone at the regulatory level. So it's possible to change them, but the change will have to come over time. Now, why? Why can't Congress just snap their finger? Because in our Constitution, there's a contract right. And if you enter into a contract with the federal government, the Congress cannot just automatically change the terms of the contract. There's a process that is a regulatory process. And the rule that allows the new Congress to get rid of old regulations without the filibuster doesn't apply to regulations adopted by Lease because of the contract clause in the Constitution. It's somewhat of a complex matter constitutionally, but the bottom line is any regulation adopted by an outgoing administration can be undone by a simple majority vote of the House and the Senate without a filibuster, except regulations enacted through leases, because that impacts the contract right in the Constitution. So that's the way they're trying to bind the Trump administration, using contracts that will take time to undo. Now, we got to move on to other things. But before I do, I got to tell you about Swiss America. They've been warning people about a secret war on cash. Now, they're rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau, and they want to be able to help you with your retirement and finances. They are the trusted leader for 40 years in this country for precious metals, and they're seeing what this particular administration has been doing with regulation to try to track your spending of cash. It is a secret war on cash. They have a report they'd love to get to you completely for free. It takes less than 15 minutes to read, and all you have to do is call or text 800-289-2646. Mention my name, Erick, E-R-I-C-K. The All-Out War on Cash, digital forms of currency included, is growing. So read the Secret War on Cash report completely free. Just mention Erick, E-R-I-C-K, when you call or text 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. It's a free report. Just mention my name, Erick, when you call or text 800-289-2646. Message and data rates may apply. Swiss America would love to have a relationship with you. Reach out to them today, 800-289-2646. Okay, so my buddy Derek sends me this direct note. Couldn't the signatories to the leases be put on notice not to sign them until the new administration so they could be altered? If they don't go until January 9th, that leaves time to back out. Y'all are channeling me, and I should have said this. This is part of the problem with Donald Trump's first term was the presumption of being a shoo-in for a second term. So the way the Republicans wrote this law back in 2017 to expand ANWR was to presume Trump was going to have a second term. So literally what the law says is that these leases have to be completed by January 19th of 2025, or the whole process has to start over again. So so Biden won, not Trump. And Biden, by the way, doesn't want to do any of the leases. And the reason they're doing it January 9th is because by law, they've got to be done. There will be penalties to the federal government according to the terms and provisions. And I shouldn't say penalties, that's a bad word, but essentially the president is ordered to do this by January 19th of 2025. He has no choice. If there is one carve-out provision in there that if there is, it's a couple of problems, and I cannot remember exactly what the caveats are, but the whole regulatory process would start over again. It would be expedited, so it would only take a year. It wouldn't take 5 years, but it would still slow it down by a year. So the Biden administration decided because their regulatory process was concluded, they can't now start a new regulatory process and say there's a problem. They have to comply with the terms of the legislation, which says all the leases have to be completed by January 19th. So that's where we are. And again, the whole law was written on the premise that Donald Trump was going to win a second term. So we'd let the Trump administration do it in the second term and make sure that it was all said and done before a Democrat got elected. And instead, Joe Biden got elected. Now, you will note that Joe Biden could have done this 3 years ago, but Joe Biden decided to drag it out until the very end. And the law is very specific. All the leases have to be gotten out the door by January 19th once the regulatory process is concluded. So again, now as I'm talking, I'm remembering the answer to why doesn't Biden just cancel and start over. So the way the law is written, the regulatory process, once it's concluded, you got to get everything done by January 19th. Well, Biden finished the regulatory process. They finished the regulatory process a year and a half ago. So he's dragged his feet to the end. And their lawyer's conclusion was they can't say, oh, we found a problem, we have to start over and extend the leases another year or so, because they did a thorough regulatory process. So they've just waited until the end. And in the process, what they did with the regulations is they added all of these little carve-outs of what they can and cannot do. They shrunk the footprint that you're allowed to drill from. They added environmental burdens, things like that. And so they actually think that they can get these leases out. Congress can't undo them. Trump's not going to start the process over because it's going to take a long time, and the companies are just going to suck it up. Now, here's an exception to all of this. You get the leases. Trump can work with Congress and the corporations to agree to alter the leases. That's your carve-out. Now, it can be filibustered. That's the problem. But if Trump and the corporations get together on January 21st and say, hey, let's agree to make changes to the leases and the underlying regulations, they can do it. It's just something that the Senate Democrats could filibuster if they wanted to. But there are processes. It's just going to slow them down. And that's the point, is Biden can't stop Trump from making these changes. He can just slow Trump down for making the changes because he knows Trump's only got 4 years and a lot of other stuff to deal with. That's one of the problems, honestly. In my personal opinion, don't shoot. My personal opinion. Regardless of the nominees, I'm not going to give any of the names of the nominees. Some of them I like, some of them don't. But regardless of the nominees, if we go through protracted confirmation processes, Trump's not going to have boots on the ground day one in his administration to get things done. And every second is going to count for Donald Trump. Every single second is going to count for Donald Trump. So he's got to have his entire team in place day one in order to have the impact that we want him to have. Now, going to move on, because it's not just oil leases that Joe Biden is screwing up. He's also screwing up the Middle East, everything else. I got to play you Jonathan Lemire. Now, you got to understand, Jonathan Lemire is a very progressive reporter. He gets his station on MSNBC because he's so progressive, and he writes at Politico. He's a chief Washington correspondent. Dude just wants to hump the Democrats' leg. I mean, he is like a rabid little chihuahua going to town on somebody's leg. As long as that person is a Democrat. Remember, Jonathan Lemire is the guy who, when Joe Biden said that Donald Trump supporters were garbage or trash, he's the one who's like, oh, no. He meant this one guy on stage. That's what he meant. Here's the altered transcript. And he tried to he tried to exercise inordinate amounts of damage control. It was beclowning, but he dug his feet in because he's humping Biden's leg. And so on MSNBC this morning, this was the conversation with him on foreign policy.
Administration officials en route to the region now to start getting the lay of the land in since Assad has been deposed. You're right. President Biden was just in Africa, a trip that Donald Trump never made during his first term in office. It fulfilled a campaign promise, Biden to go. And this is going to be a deeply consequential foreign policy legacy for this president. And certainly there have been questions even within his own party, how he is cozied up to Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel. But we're seeing there the changes in Lebanon with Hezbollah down. Of course, the situation in Gaza continues. There are still hostages. We're seeing his support for Ukraine and how that has shaped alliances and shaped Europe. And now he will be handing off to his successor, who obviously has very different foreign policy views, but he hasn't done so just yet. And that's the key point. Though Trump has been on the global stage, we know he was in Paris over the weekend. The Biden team, the Biden administration, still conducting foreign policy and will to until the last minute.
Right. So you got to understand this to set the stage here. Jonathan Lemire writes for Politico, and he is responding in part to a piece from his own publication. The headline is Biden shrinks from view ahead of Trump's return to Washington. And the subtitle, with 42 days left in office, Biden avoids unscripted moments or press questions. Joe Biden is president of the United States for 42 more days, but within the Democratic Party on Capitol Hill and even within his own administration, it feels like he left the Oval Office weeks ago. Biden has effectively disappeared from the radar in the wake of Democrats' bruising electoral loss. Since November 5th, he's largely stuck to prepared remarks, avoided unscripted public appearances or press questions, and opted to sit out the raging debate over Donald Trump's victory, policy conversations in Congress, and the Democratic Party's future. He's been so cavalier and selfish about how he approaches the final weeks of the job, said a former White House official. That means someone who worked for him. Jen Psaki, maybe? I don't know. Across nearly 2 weeks abroad since the election, Biden spoke just 7 words to the media traveling with him. He has yet to schedule a post-election press conference, as Presidents Obama and Bush did when they were on their way out of office. He went to the Rose Garden to publicly praise the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, met with Israeli President Isaac Herzog, and spoke to the press Sunday about Bashar al-Assad fleeing Syria. But otherwise, his post-election domestic schedule has been filled with events such as honoring the 2024 NBA champions, thanking longtime supporters at a South Lawn dinner, and participating in a Friendsgiving event. Biden's low profile since the election has contributed to the sense of rudderlessness that's taken hold across swaths of Washington as lawmakers, aides, and party officials brace for Trump's return to power and seek a new direction and vision ahead of the midterms in 2028. The White House and Biden, they say, has shown little interest in helping chart the party's future beyond January 20th, the day of Trump's inauguration. Biden has focused his aides' energies largely on managing the presidential transition and tending to a few final items meant to burnish his legacy, including a speech on the economy happening today, and Vice President Kamala Harris, who cast herself on the campaign trail as the future of the party, has all but disappeared from the scene. There's no leadership. It's a total vacuum, one Democrat close to senior lawmakers said bluntly. It's kind of funny how very few of them want to speak on the record. While Biden has offered little in the way of leadership, officials say there's also not much demand from the party's rank and file to hear from a president they blame for relegating them back into the minority. In conversations that I've having, they don't even mention the president. It's kind of sad, said one Democrat close to senior lawmakers. It feels like Trump is president already. It sure does. It sure does. Y'all, I gotta say, Jonathan Lemire can do his proverbial leg humping of Joe Biden's leg, But Joe Biden really isn't much of a leader, nor has he ever been. Just think about where we are. Syria has collapsed. The Israelis, by the way, as I'm talking to you right now, as I am talking to you, the Israelis are bombing the Syrian ports, blowing up Syrian military vessels. And also they're bombing supposed warehouses harboring chemical weapons. They're literally, as I'm speaking right now, there are explosions in Syria from the Israelis. Ukraine and Russia are still fighting. North Korea is now involved in Ukraine. China and Iran are helping Russia. Israel has been fighting on 3 fronts now: Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza. By the way, Iran has gotten $10 billion more out of Washington. That's right. This is from the Washington Free Beacon, happening today. The Biden-Harris administration waived sanctions on Iran, providing Tehran access to $10 billion in once frozen funds. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken determined that, quote, it is in the national security interest of the United States to waive mandatory economic sanctions that bar Iraq from transferring $10 billion to Iran in electricity import payments. So remember, it is this administration that says Iran always uses its income to fund terror, and they're getting $10 billion more to fund terror, thanks to the Biden administration. You've got China, ever expansionist. The Chinese have been hacking our cell phones so much so, the Biden administration is encouraging Americans to use iMessage and WhatsApp on their phones. The idea that Joe Biden somehow leaves us in a better place, it may play well to Democrats, but it's a lie. It's not true. The world is at war on Joe Biden's watch. And the Democrats can make excuses for it all they want. It's simply not the case that Joe Biden has been good for the world, for American foreign policy, or for American leadership in the world. And everyone seems to be just absolutely flat out ready for Donald Trump to get back into office and bring some order to Joe Biden's chaos. The Democrats on Capitol Hill, they no longer care about Joe Biden. You should care about cleaning the air in your house with the EdenPURE Thunderstorm. You can get 3 of them and save $200 by going to EdenPureDeals.com. Put in discount code ERICK3, ERICK3 at EdenPureDeals.com. It's an air purifier. You can hold it in your hand. It's so small, you hold it in your hand. It has a plug that flips out. You can plug it to the wall, or you can use a USB cord and plug it up in your car. I've used mine in my car and in rental cars to clean the air. Someone smoked in the car. It wipes out smoke odors, litter box odors, dirty diaper odors, musty odors, fishy odors, you name it. It wipes out every odor because it generates ozone that locks onto the ions of odors, wipes them out, and gets rid of every odor. It also now generates plasma that kills 99.9% of bacteria and viruses, in addition to trapping pet dander, pollen, and dust that float through the air. So you get cleaner air and you get better smelling air with the EdenPURE Thunderstorm. And you can get 3 of them for less than $200. You can save $200. Get one for upstairs, downstairs, your basement, your attic, your RV, your travel bag. And again, so small you can keep it in your travel bag. I do. EdenPureDeals.com. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code ERICK3, ERICK3 at EdenPureDeals.com. Welcome back. It's Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, as always, if you text Erick, ERICK, to 33777, you get the live stream, the show notes, the podcast, all that. Y'all, Nobel laureates, 75 of them, have said the Senate should reject Robert Kennedy Jr.'s nomination. Now, I'm opposed to Robert Kennedy Jr. as well. I think in addition to him being a horrible human being, he's a terrible conspiracy theorist who doesn't just reject crazy things. He rejects a lot of reasonable, good, and sound things like vaccines, and his supporters like to play 3-card monte where they shuffle things around hoping you don't pay attention to all of his insane statements about vaccines causing autism and other things. No. He didn't challenge regular vaccines, just or no baloney. I apparently know more about him than most of his supporters do. He's a horrible human being. He should not be Secretary of Health and Human Services, but he's probably going to get confirmed thanks to 75 Nobel laureates saying he should not be. He would put the public's health in jeopardy. Do the Democrats not understand anything? You trotted out a letter of a bajillion national security experts assuring Americans Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation and it was a lie. Then you trotted out a bunch of Nobel laureate economists saying Donald Trump would destroy the economy. It's simply not true. Now you got 75 Nobel laureates saying Robert Kennedy Jr. should not be confirmed to Health and Human Services. The best way to get Robert F. Kennedy Jr. confirmed is to trot out a bunch of arrogant progressive Nobel laureates to say he shouldn't. That is an affirmative permission structure for the GOP to endorse RFK and confirm his nomination. The left learns nothing and forgets nothing. They're like the Bourbons of France. The members of the press do not understand how discrediting it was to release a list of national security experts saying that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation when it turned out to be true, because it destroyed the credibility of the national security apparatus of this country. It is why there are conspiracy theorists about the Trump shooter. It is why the assassin, would-be assassins. It is why there are conspiracy theories about Luigi Mangione. It is why there are conspiracy theories about healthcare in this country, because you had so many prominent members of the expert elite class cast doubt on something that was never in doubt. And now people question all the experts all the time because of those people, including this. This will help RFK. Now, I got to tell you about Omaha Steaks, because I would love to have you go to omahasteaks.com today and load up your cart. Everything is site-wide 50% off right now at omahasteaks.com. You can get incredible steaks, seafood, poultry, pork, desserts, sides. You get your sides for your meals. You can even get main courses. They got a great pot roast as an aside. You go to omahasteaks.com, load up your cart, everything 50% off. At checkout, you'll see a discount code box. You put in Erick, E-R-I-C-K, you'll get another $30 off, minimum order required, at omahasteaks.com. Omahasteaks.com. It's a great way to impress friends and family, clients, colleagues, business associates. Omahasteaks.com. If you don't know what to buy, if you're overwhelmed by too much choice, just put Erick, E-R-I-C-K, in the search bar, and you'll get some carefully curated packages to choose from. And then at checkout, put Erick in as your promo code and get an extra $30 off. Again, minimum order required. omahasteaks.com. Check them out today. I'm delighted to have you with me today. Welcome. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you would like to be on the program, very happy to have you. Real quick, if you got Christmas song recommendations for the Christmas show, I'm putting the final touches on what music to be played. You can email me, Erick at ewerickson.com. I will take those under advisement. No guarantees. I'll play them as we're building them up. Got some good interviews scheduled for the annual Christmas show. This is going to be, if you were listening yesterday, a little bit repetitious at first because some of the audio I'm going to play, but it's for a completely different reason. The audio from yesterday just has to be very, very relevant to the point that needs to be made related to some stuff in the news today. And I want to go to Donald Trump's Meet the Press interview. I want to go back to it. And let me go here now. This is Donald Trump talking to Kristen Welker of Meet the Press about the Dreamers.
The Dreamers are going to come later, and we have to do something about the Dreamers, because these are people that have been brought here at a very young age, and many of these are middle-aged people now. They don't even speak the language of their country, and yes, we're going to do something about the Dreamers.
What does that mean? What are you going to do?
I will work with the Democrats on a plan, and if we can come up with a plan, but the Democrats have made it very, very difficult to do anything. Republicans are very open to the Dreamers. The Dreamers, we're talking many years ago, they were brought into this country, many years ago. Some of them are no longer young people, and in many cases, they become successful. They have great jobs. In some cases, they have small businesses. Some cases, they might have large businesses. and we're going to have to do something with them. And
You want them to be able to stay. That's what you're saying.
I do. I want to be able to work something out. And it should have been able to be worked out over the last 3 or 4 years. And it never got worked out. You know, Biden could have done it because he controlled, you know, Congress to a certain extent, right? He could have done something, but they didn't do it. I never understood why, because they always seem to want to do it. But then when it comes down to it, they don't. I think we can work with the Democrats and work something out.
That's Donald Trump on the Dreamers. And who specifically is he talking about? There are in this country 20 and 30-something-year-old adults who came here as small children with their parents illegally decades ago. And they've been in this country in legal limbo ever since. They don't know any other country. They have no memory of another country. Many of them speak English better than Spanish, and some want them deported. I personally, I'll tell you my own position. I'll lay it out there. I think it would be cruel to deport a 20 or 30-something-year-old person who has only ever known this country, has no memory of their home country, and the only reason they're being deported is because their parents committed a crime decades ago and brought them into this country. I know there are people who say otherwise. I personally also view the situation as if we built a wall and secure the border, many people who dogmatically insist even these people should be deported would probably say, no, okay, we can leave you here. My personal view on immigration at this point, there are very few things on which I've changed my mind politically over the last few decades. And this is where I've changed my mind on this one. I think anyone who's come here in the last 4 years under Joe Biden, I don't care the circumstances, I don't care the story, deport them. But the grandmother who illegally crossed the border 30, 40 years ago, we tell her you can stay, but you're never getting citizenship. And in fact, we tell the Dreamers you can't get citizenship. You can become a legal resident alien, never fear for deportation again, but you can't be a citizen. We should deprive all of these people of citizenship, but some of them, I think, you've been here so long, you've established roots, some of you have no memory of another country. We'll let you stay, but you're never going to be able to vote in an election. You're never going to be a citizen. I think we can do that. It's compassionate, but it also has a penalty to discourage other people from doing it. You can disagree on that. That's fine. But Donald Trump sounds like he's on board with me at this point. It's a reasonable position to have. And it's not only reasonable on that, he also was asked about Jerome Powell and tossing Jerome Powell. There have been pressure from MAGA to fire Jerome Powell. This is Donald Trump.
The chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, said he will not leave his post even if you ask him to. Will you try to replace Jerome Powell?
No, I don't think so. I don't see it. But I think if I told him to, he would. But if I asked him to, he probably wouldn't. But if I told him to, he would.
You don't have plans to do that right now?
No, we don't.
Not going to fire Jerome Powell. In other words, Donald Trump is being very reasonable. He's being very reasonable. Now, this is Michael Schmidt in the New York Times today, and this is why I bring all of this up. Headline, a test for the system. Donald Trump will take office with weakened checks on his power. When the makers of Schoolhouse Rock set out in the 1970s to explain how the federal government works, they likened it to a three-ring circus. It was more than just a comment on the chaos of Washington. It was a metaphor for the three co-equal branches of government that make our democracy what it is. Each controls the other, you see, the song went, and that's what we call checks and balances. I'm an investigative reporter for the New York Times, and I've been thinking a lot about those three branches. The basic building blocks of government will fare with President-elect Donald Trump returning to power. He has promised to upend the system and use its power to prosecute his political enemies, and Democrats and anti-Trump Republicans warn that means he will use his second presidency to rule like an autocrat, putting extraordinary pressure on the nation's democratic experiment. Some people I've spoken to about this, including top officials from Trump's first administration, have faith in the three branches of government, a system built to keep presidents' power in check. But the country's three branches of government are in a weaker position to hold a president accountable than they were when Trump first took office in 2017, in part because of the stranglehold he has over his own party, and some of the change he has promised to bring Washington would further erode checks and balances. I want to note a couple of things here as he descends into this. One of which is he gives very little coverage in this piece to the federal courts. The United States Supreme Court has, even with the Trump appointees, not always sided with Donald Trump. But you see, this guy writing for the New York Times has got to be a progressive, and progressives have been working very hard to undermine people's faith in the Supreme Court. And so this guy has no faith in the Supreme Court. In fact, let's see. Here's what he writes on the court. One of the greatest tests of three branches came when President Richard Nixon was accused of abusing his power and breaking the law. He was investigated by the Justice Department, FBI, and the executive branch. He was compelled to disclose evidence in a landmark decision by the Supreme Court, which is part of the judicial branch. When he took office in 2017, the ideological divide was evenly split on the Supreme Court, except it really wasn't. Over the course of his term, he appointed 3 justices and stacked the lower courts with hardened conservatives. Earlier this year, in connection with the Justice Department's indictment against him, the court ruled that a president has significant immunity. Trump embraced the decision. That's kind of a rather broad reading of what the Supreme Court decided, and many of the people who say that literally claimed at one point the Supreme Court gave him the power to assassinate his political opponents, which wasn't true. So you've got a guy at the New York Times, when Trump is now doing everything he can to be reasonable, coming out and saying, actually, the system may not be strong enough to stop Donald Trump. And he begins, by the way, with one of the things that I think it's a personal pet peeve, claiming that there are 3 co-equal branches of government. There are not 3 co-equal branches of government. Remember what I talked the other day about norms, and Democrats talk about shattered norms, and it only applies to Republicans, never applies to them. It is a Democratic norm to claim there are 3 co-equal branches of government. There are not. The order in which the branches were written in the Constitution, Articles 1, 2, and 3, they are the strongest to the weakest branch of government. The Congress is stronger than the presidency and the judiciary. That doesn't mean they don't have checks and balances on each other. They do. But the Congress reigns supreme. The Congress can impeach Supreme Court justices and deny funding for the Supreme Court. In fact, Congress has so much power over the courts, they get to form all the lower courts. They get to approve all the judges, the Senate does, and they get to fund them or not fund them, and they have so much power over that. The Constitution admonishes Congress, you can't actually dock the pay of sitting judges. You can cut off their power, you can stop paying the power bill, you can stop paying the law clerks, you can stop paying everything, but you can't stop paying the judges. That's how much power Congress has. The Supreme Court has relatively little power over Congress, other than interpreting laws and deciding whether they're constitutional or not. It is actually a lie. And by the way, it's the way we all grew up. I acknowledge that there were 3 co-equal branches of government, but that's not in the writings of the Federalist Papers. That's not in the thinking of the founders. There are 3 branches of government. They have checks and balances on each other, but Congress reigns supreme. And Congress can take power back from the president at any time, and I wish it would. What I find very notable from Michael Schmidt in the New York Times, though, is this fear that the courts aren't going to restrain Donald Trump. The courts actually have a lot of power against the executive, more than against Congress. You almost have 2 co-equal branches, the executive and the judiciary, but Congress lords over both of them. But you're not going to get that from the New York Times. Instead, you're going to get fear, and what you're going to get is a very, very up to the line, almost explicit statement that this guy, Michael Schmidt, and the New York Times doesn't have faith in our Constitution. I have extraordinary faith in our Constitution. And by the way, I get this all the time from reporters. I have a reporter who texts me all the time who's convinced that Donald Trump's going to wreck the system. I'm like, no, the system's stronger than Donald Trump. The constitutional system that we have is stronger than any one man. Well, no. You don't understand. You don't understand. The Republicans are never, Matt Gaetz. Hello, Matt Gaetz. Why is Matt Gaetz not the Attorney General of the United States or the incoming Attorney General of the United States? Because our system of government is stronger than Donald Trump, and enough senators rejected him, he had to pull his name. It's why Pete Hegseth's nomination is in jeopardy, because the system is stronger than the President of the United States. And the only people who do not think that's so are the people who have been committed to weakening that system over the last number of years so they can have an autocrat in the form of a Democrat. You know, that's something people miss. All these people who think Donald Trump is an autocrat, they're perfectly happy with autocrats so long as he has a D next to his name. These people are perfectly happy to have a Democrat in charge. I just think, my friends, that the worries and the hand-wringing from members of the media over our system would never come up if a Democrat was similarly situated. They only care about it for Donald Trump. And because they think that our system is systemically racist and bad, they can't understand just how great our system is. You know, there's some polling out from Patrick Ruffini of Echelon Insights. Turns out that white progressives are more likely than black or Hispanic Americans to think our country's racist, and more likely than black or Hispanic Americans to say they don't have pride in our country. And those are the people who write at the New York Times. By the way, before I get out here, there's some breaking news. Mitch McConnell, 82 years old, has fallen during a Republican lunch on Capitol Hill. EMTs are treating him. He injured his face. This is the second big fall for Mitch McConnell. He had that one that gave him a concussion. Appears he will be fine, but he has fallen. That's breaking news hitting the wire here as we go to commercial break. Hey, Mom, I'm going to be on News Nation at 3:15 p.m. Eastern, 2:15 your time. I'm not sure what channel it is, though, on your cable package, but I'll be on News Nation at 3:15 p.m. That's mostly for my mom and dad, but for the rest of you as well. I'll be on TV here in a little while. Eli Lake writing in the Free Press. According to President Joe Biden, the end of Bashar al-Assad's tyranny in Syria was made possible by his administration's foreign policy. Speaking from the White House Sunday in a televised address, he said, quote, "For years, the main backers of Assad have been Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia, but over the last week, their support collapsed, all three of them, because all three of them are far weaker today than they were when I took office. Try not to laugh." Biden attributes the woes that have befallen this axis of resistance to the blows Ukraine and Israel have delivered upon their own self-defense with unflagging support from the U.S. This isn't just a deceptive telling of recent history. Biden had it backwards. While it's true Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia are weaker today than they were when Biden was inaugurated, it's not because Biden had the foresight to unleash the Jewish state against America's enemies. It's because Israel defied Biden's efforts to restrain it. Syria has toppled its tyrant in spite of Biden, not because of it. When Israel took the very steps that have weakened Iran and its proxies, it was greeted by threats and disapproval from Washington. On September 24th, the UN General Assembly, Biden pleaded for Israel to accept a diplomatic solution. In May, Biden threatened to withhold vital arms shipments to Israel. Biden's approach to Israel's war has been to prevent regional escalation. That may sound sensible, but it's meant limiting Israel's ability to be defensive against Iran's proxies. This conventional wisdom boiled down to respecting Iran's regional ambitions. Instead of trying to roll back the militias funded, trained, and directed by the Islamic Republic's Revolutionary Guard, Obama tried to manage the conflict. Like Biden, he wanted to avoid escalation. Biden told Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic in 2016, quote, "The competition between the Saudis and the Iranians, which has helped to feed proxy wars and chaos, requires us to say to our friends as well as to the Iranians that they need to find an effective way to share the neighborhood and institute some sort of cold peace. To be sure, the Obama doctrine did not formally accept Iran's cynical meddling in Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and Lebanon, but Obama was unwilling to do anything about Iran's imperialism. After Assad violated his 2013 red line, Obama punted. He asked Congress for a formal authorization to use force. In the end, the U.S. did nothing. In less than 2 years, Russia's Air Force was in Syria bombing the rebels America said it was supporting. Obama and Biden have both botched the Middle East, and now Biden has the audacity to try to claim credit for things that we worked very hard to prevent happening. Iran being dispatched by Israel and Syria falling to the rebels. But of course, Joe Biden wants the credit. Now, I want to give credit to Old Glory Bank for rethinking how to do business as a bank. A group of conservatives got together. They said they wanted a bank where conservative business or individual could do business and know their bank account's never going to get canceled because they're conservatives. It gave rise to Old Glory Bank. There were several competing ventures out there. This is the one that worked. Why? Because instead of thinking outside the box, they thought inside the box. They bought an existing bank. They rebranded it. They made it available nationwide instead of regionally in Oklahoma, where it's headquartered. And they started taking not only online deposits, but figuring out how they'd be able to accept cash at the bank by people remotely. And it's worked. There are 88,000 retail locations where you can deposit cash using a QR code on an app, and it goes into your bank account. I've used it. It works. Old Glory Bank works. They work for you. They do loans for businesses and homes, mortgages, automobiles, you name it. All you have to do is go to oldglorybank.com. Oldglorybank.com. You can fill everything out online at oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender, terms and conditions apply. And yes, it really is my bank. It can be your bank too. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, there are a couple things I want to weave together, and I may fail, but I'm going to try. This past week, world leaders gathered in Paris for the reopening of Notre Dame. I think probably all of us remember when Notre Dame caught fire. It was a global news story because it's such an iconic building. It happened in 2019. Mary, Queen of Scots, was married at Notre Dame. Joan of Arc was beatified at Notre Dame. Napoleon was crowned in Notre Dame. There are books written about Notre Dame, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. There are movies that feature Notre Dame. The bells of Notre Dame are famous. In the French Revolution, the revolutionaries stormed in and stole many of the bells and melted them down to make cannons and weapons. Notre Dame has been central to Paris, but it's been central to Western civilization. It is the epitome of a Gothic cathedral. It is something that was remarkable, and there was a massive controversy after the fire in how they were going to rebuild it, as to whether or not they were going to rebuild it the same or whether or not they were going to modernize it in ways that would bring about modern architecture, which I personally think lacks soul. And they chose to build it as it was. A beautiful restoration. Now, this is not the first time that Notre Dame has been restored. And you know that the spire didn't exist until the 18th century, or 19th century, rather. Eugene Emmanuel Viollet-le-Duc rebuilt, renovated, changed one of the windows, altered one of the rosettes by 15 degrees, changed out the structure of some of the windows, added more statues of the apostles, brought back statues from the Old Testament that had been torn down in the French Revolution. Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, rebuilt it as the world knew it. We don't build buildings like Notre Dame anymore. And I see a lot of people online lament, we don't build buildings like this anymore. We don't. Why don't we? One, because our money goes to where our heart is, and our hearts are now selfish. They're not geared toward God. We don't build elaborate cathedrals to God anymore because we want our money to go to skyscrapers, to capitalism, to banks, to things like that. We put our money where our minds and hearts are. Where our money goes shows what we worship, and Western society worships money. That's why in every town, the biggest building tends to be owned by the bank, not the church. We don't build great buildings anymore, by and large. And then the more modern you are, the more I think architecture loses. So my son is into modern architecture, and some of it I do appreciate. Some of it I do find pretty. I like modern architecture that reflects the past, but the Cubist, 1950s, 60s architecture, like go find a Catholic church, the post-Vatican II Catholic churches, and they all look despicable. You can tell them. I mean, you can drive past one of these Catholic churches built in the 60s and 70s. You're like, that's a church? Meanwhile, here I am in Macon, Georgia, and out my window is St. Joseph's Cathedral, built by slaves in the 1800s. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous old building. We don't build buildings like that anymore. We've detached ourselves from God. We've detached ourselves from that level of architecture. There's an architecture firm in Atlanta called Historical Properties. And one day, if I can get my buddy Vince Longo to build my house, if I can find the money, grow the show, get more revenue, buy some land, I want to build a house. And I want my house to look like it's been sitting on the land for 200 years. I want something that's very modern, but looks like it's been there for 200 years. I want something that has all the modern luxuries. I want one of those car wash showers with the bajillion shower heads in it that spray every crack in your body at the same time under immense water pressure, enough to take your skin off, and have a steam room that built into the shower. I want a car wash shower. But I want the house to look like it's been there forever. I want something that just looks like it was purpose-built centuries ago. Too much of our modernity is modern for the sake of modern, and that gets into social media and how social media detracts us and detaches us from things that are beautiful. I follow accounts on social media that show beautiful things, beautiful architecture, beautiful landscapes. And I find the more and more people are online, the more detached they become from reality, and honestly, the more they become detached from beauty. You know, one of the most beautiful things on planet Earth, we don't talk about it in this way. Do you know one of the most beautiful things on planet Earth? People. Now, I say people are stupid all the time, but people are made in the image of God. And that's beautiful. And every individual on planet Earth is distinct and unique, except for identical twins. Even identical twins have different fingerprints. Every single person on the planet is unique. And when we weave ourselves into social media and become hyper online and hyper isolated, we forget the beauty of all other people. We can forget beauty in the world. Luigi Mangione appears to have been one of the people who went so down online rabbit holes, he forgot the beauty of the world around him, and all he was left with was what you find on social media, which is anger. Now, I want you to follow along with me on a couple of points here. Just follow along with me. There is a common theme, and it's a theme reflected in, for example, C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. It's in J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit series, in a lot of T.S. Eliot's writings and in Christian philosophy, that God creates, and in fact, if you're Jewish, you'll appreciate this, I think, more than most Christians. In Genesis 1, when it talks about the creation story, it uses the word bara. God baras. God creates. And that word bara, it's a divine word. It never applies in Scripture to us. And it means God divinely created something, in some way created something that we can't create. So when they built the Tower of Babel, you didn't see the word bara. When Noah built the ark, you didn't see bara. But when God made the first day, it's bara. When God made people, bara. God created, bara. He created divinely. And that divinity in that creation was something special, and it was something unique. And we tend to devalue now that creation. The more you go online, you see devaluing of it. And this gets to the point of T.S. Eliot and C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, that what we do when we attempt to do something divine is all we can do is mock. And the further away from God you get, the more you mock. So, for example, Sauron and Saruman and the building of the Uruk-hai and the like in Lord of the Rings, they can't build creatures created fearfully in the image of God. They can build things that mock God's creation. They can't build real community. They build something that mocks real community. And in the same way, God intended us to be with other people. I mean, Adam and Eve were created as a couple because God said man's not meant to be alone. And so when we build community online, we build community that mocks God's community. We build a community that perversely isolates us. It doesn't unite us. We think we're united. We think we're plugged in, but we're overwhelmed and we're isolated. We're sitting in front of our computer. We're not with other people. We're not breaking bread. We're yelling angrily at people we don't even know online, many of whom are bots. And as we get pulled into that, we separate more and more from what God intended. We build a community of our own, and it's a cesspool because we cannot build divinely in the way God does. Anything we do sinfully mocks him. And we see this online in the perversions of social media, where many people, and I've run this risk myself, where you interact with someone regularly on Instagram. What do you call them? My friend, my friend, my friend. You don't know them. You've never met them in person. You just interact with them on social media. You see their stuff on Instagram, and suddenly you think you're friends with them. You become invested in the life of a stranger. And that stranger's not going to be there to tend to you if you get sick. That stranger's not going to be there. We've built a community that mocks. Louis Mangione was just pulled into a jail about 20 minutes ago. And he started yelling at the cameras. He started yelling to the press. And what did he start saying? What was he yelling at the end? He was yelling about this mocks and betrays Americans. It's completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience. Their lived experience, he said, that is the language of someone who has been hyper online. When have you ever heard someone in the wild outside of a nutty progressive talk about everybody's lived experience? You hear the left say it. I've mocked the left on this point that they tell us always about understanding people's lived experience. And when Americans tell them that the economy sucks in their lived experience, the left mocks them for that. But the lived experience phrase, it's something that people hyper online say. Luigi Mangione, based on what we know, he had back surgery, went through a period of despair dealing with insurance companies alike, and he got super online and he went down rabbit holes and he isolated himself. And in isolating himself, he got hyper online. Dude needed to touch some grass. And there's a lesson for all of us in this. How so many of us, we need to touch grass. We need to get offline and into real community. About 6 months ago, based on what we know on the timeline, Luigi Mangione had back surgery. And then friends of his on Twitter and elsewhere started pinging him on social media and saying, Louis, haven't heard from you. Are you okay? Luigi, are you there? Reply to me, please. We're concerned about you. Luigi, he never replied. What we know now in his timeline is that he was beginning to descend into despair and some sort of madness. Dude needed to touch some grass. He needed community, and he isolated himself. And it's not a coincidence, I think, that the angriest people we're encountering in politics now are the people who are most online. And when they have community offline, they're having community of people who are just as online as they are. And so they're not actually breaking bread with people who are disengaged from the online chatter and out of the real world. They're interacting with the people who are most plugged into the echo chamber online, and they fuel each other's frenzy and madness. We can't create the way God creates. We can only mock what he creates. God created men and women and put us into a community with each other. We created social media and isolated each other into something that looks and purports to be a community, but is actually deeply isolating and prevents us from actually having meaningful interaction with other human beings who are different than us. All of us could use to be online less. And I have a sneaking suspicion that we're going to learn Luigi Mangione went down rabbit holes online and became more and more radicalized online and gave up the community of people fearfully made in the image of God around him in favor of the community, made fearfully in his image online, and it broke him. And we're seeing more and more people like that. And that's one of the other reasons these are such dangerous times. When you're yelling lived experience and you don't mean it ironically, you are someone who is hyper online and deeply broken. Hillsdale College has built a community around the country of people in person, live human beings, where you don't get indoctrinated, you get educated. They've been doing this since 1844 in Michigan. They'd love to have you involved. Go online to figure out how to connect with Hillsdale offline at erickforhillsdale.com today. Go to Erick for Hillsdale. In fact, it's been a while since I've done this, so I'm going to go erickforhillsdale.com. If you go today for erickforhillsdale.com, you will be able to take a lecture series on Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, part of the literature department at Hillsdale College, taught by Dwight Lindley, the associate professor of English literature. And it gives you a sense of how Hillsdale conducts education. These are great video trailers. Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. In fact, if you go to erickforhillsdale.com right now, you'll see it at 6 lessons, 3.5 hours long. You take it at your own pace. And y'all, I got to tell you, Hillsdale, all of these that they do are great. And also, you'll be able to see their catalog, the DVDs, the books that you can order for friends and family, and sign up for Imprimus completely free. Go check out Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, a lecture series taught by Dwight Lindley, associate professor of English literature at Hillsdale College. It is completely free of charge. To go sign up now, erickforhillsdale.com, ERICK, erickforhillsdale.com. Y'all, I just had a near, problem. So I got to be on TV in 20 minutes. And I keep a wardrobe in my office and had to change my shirt to put on a dress shirt for TV. And I'm unzipping my pants to tuck in my shirt. And I thought, oh my gosh, am I like undressing in front of like all the people with the freaking live stream camera now that we have in the office? Thank goodness the video had rolled over to a we're in commercial break graphic instead of the video of me. Y'all didn't need to see that. Y'all did not need to see that. Okay, I gotta. Mitch McConnell's spokesman has released a statement here in the last minute. He fell at a luncheon for Republicans. His spokesman says Leader McConnell tripped following lunch, sustained a minor cut to the face, and sprained his wrist. He has been cleared to resume his schedule. He will be fine. Good. That's good to know. And meanwhile, I'm glad I'm not alone in the reaction here of seeing Luigi Mangione yelling about lived experience, that is a really big red flag, that this guy is just a hyper online loon. Meanwhile, University of Pennsylvania professor Julia Alexeyeva is online on TikTok celebrating Luigi Mangione's alleged assassination of United Healthcare's because University of Pennsylvania. Y'all, like I said in the first hour, these universities in the Ivy League have become Islamic madrasas for the wokes. They're radicalizing Americans, indoctrinating Americans into violence. They want to blow up oil pipelines and natural gas pipelines. They're assassinating the CEOs of healthcare companies and justifying it. It's going to be very, very soon before they begin assassinating oil company executives. In fact, the Times of Ireland today has a piece, an opinion piece about how we need to be more vigilant about destroying the profits of these companies. The actual headline from this piece is, when are we going to have the courage to stop the climate crisis? And this is the subtitle: Capitalism is driving the destruction of our planet. We have to think outside and against the framework of our current political system. We are rapidly moving towards environmentalists turning violent globally, led by scowling Greta Thunberg. These are dangerous times, and the people on the left just keep wanting to ratchet it up. No one wants to de-escalate on the left. They want to add a but every time they try to. They got to add a but to rationalize and explain away their own craziness. That's not a good thing. All right, I will be on TV at 3:15 on News Nation. I will see you guys tomorrow. You guys have a great rest of the day, and be in touch with me if you got Christmas music recommendations for the Christmas show.